Okay, this is a little bit on the light side, but yet still factual reality. Scientists that some of us feel are going way too far with certain things, but we always want to go to the nth degree that we can. And so, what we're looking at here is modern man's oldest possible ancestor. Now, I know that sounds strange, but some 750 million years ago to 550 million years ago, this thing happened after the giant ice age where it actually took over the whole planet and released. And then there was like that Precambrian explosion and stuff, and this was leading up into that epoch. So it's a kind of gross looking weird, but supposedly like its skin is not our skin, but its skin became the skin that became the skin that became the proto thing to us at one point million years ago, that evolved different and set everything out, right? So this is shortly after the whole world was frozen over, right? And see if I can, but there were still all the thermal vents going and things like that in the ocean. Even though it was froze over on top, things were still living. And to this day, we have saltwater, sub-zero, non-frozen, all across the Arctic, and there are starfish and all kinds of creatures. And in the same entail, it had that going on, but people feel like it was around thermal vents more and more in the central of the planet. Well, you can still see it is to this day, something like that. And you can see, things that would have been growing back then, and sponges and stuff. And there were certain creatures like this, which actually has a head and an anus on it, but it's not related to us. And so there's all these primordial coral type things too that I've talked about just a little bit. And they can find the fossils of all these things. Here's one right here, right? But what the deal is that they don't lead into anything that ends up to us. In fact, most of those things are invertibrates. They end up stretching to a phylum tree that ends up being something totally else. And jellyfish, corals, and all these type of things, other stuff, it's possible if they want to track this that it ends up being something that relates to the octopus or something like that way down the road, but it isn't us, if you understand what I'm saying, right? And at this time, half the earth looked like this, and half the earth this is Pangea. And not too long after it, there was all these basically sea bugs, right? And this thing that's not necessarily a sea bug, and it's not necessarily a sea snail kind of thing, and it's not a holothurian, and it's like a sea cucumber or things like that. It's not that. It's a different little creature, but it ended up forming into the thing that's into the thing. All right, we're used to everybody's familiar with a little evolutionary chart and how it goes back to a monkey, right? And we didn't come from no monkeys. No, well, it's not even what it reality shows. And half those things in the middle of to the end 2/3, some of them aren't even on our tree, and there are people that didn't even end up showing anything. Homo erectus and stuff is right there at the very end of it. That stuff in the middle, in fact, they still have Piltdown Man showing up in there, and he was debunked long, long ago. But regardless of that effect, the animals that ended up becoming the humanoid types, the hominids or whatever, come out of a similar tree as the primates do, but separate. And there's a split there. And like there's a split somewhat between sub-Saharans and the rest of people at about 1.2 million years, they say, and then 70 to 50,000 years between Denisovans and the oriental types of Mongoloid, if you will, and things, and somewhere in between there on the other. And then, of course, there's reintegration, though, that happened with certain people and stuff like that, and Neanderthal integration and stuff like that that goes on. But it goes back to like 1.2 million years ago, where we're looking at the other end from like 750, they say, is probably about threshold. 750. So you can go 600 is what they try to say in the thing, and then they give a threshold. So it'd be more comfortable to say 600 million years ago there was this creature that looked like that. Now, after that was those things, and then it becomes sea scorpions and all kinds of weird things that you've seen shows about. But that's generally in the next age, and they even start to have armored things with a different type of skin that's different than what we have whatsoever, that's more scaly, more lizard-like, and they believe that a lot of the scaled type creatures come out of this. Not just snakes and things like that, but something, alligators come out of the same thing, but because it's so far away, so long ago, it splits into different things, and then those change, and then they go through a whole era, and everything almost dies off again, like what's happened so many times. But these things are existed, and then they start to evolve and turn into different things, and it's hard for you to believe after 2 or 3 of these shifts that, like, well, 3 shifts back, these came from the same thing. So 4 shifts back, they were the same thing. But we can see how quickly we can shift a dog whenever we're trying to do it. So you have to believe that nature, in a sense, in a long time, and Darwinism concept comes into play, and somewhat, but not exclusively. Let's just say that. And they found these simple little trails that are in there, and they made these burrows, and they're like burrowing in, and they twist around, and they're maybe twice the size of a grain of rice, you know, if that. And here again, so here's a rendition of what they pretty much would have looked like. And so sometimes they go too far, because I'm sure you've aware now that they take us back to the monkey thing, but similar to monkey, it's a primate type of thing, and most people probably know now that they can take us a couple of steps back from that, and it was really this shrew kind of thing. Well, why? Well, because the shrew kind of thing turned into these set of creatures, and one of those had a weird offset that was more stood up, and then another jump, and that ended up becoming the things that 1.2 million years ago. If you follow me, I wish I could just show pictures, you know, what they've shown in all these shows and stuff, but man, you get marked for everything. I had quite a few videos up, and I've started uploading them here now, and I've gotten about 24 into it, and 3 have gotten blocked already off of just simple little things. And it's not music, because I tried not to even try that. So it's just weird segments, and I've kept, okay, well, somebody told me you've got to keep it under 10 seconds and stuff. If you go over 10, just clip it for just a hair in the middle of it if you can, or something like that, so there's never more than 10 seconds. And oh no, that didn't work either. Anyhow, guys, never mind that. So if you take that shrew and you go way back, it becomes something that was somewhat amphibious. And that thing that's amphibious, this thing turns into after 5 or 6 generations the other way. It starts to grow legs, because it has locomotion movement, and mainly chambered in a front part and a back part, and blah 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 and everything. So it basically has proto nubs that become legs, you know. So there's one point there that it almost looks like a manatee kind of thing, or the oh man, what's the name of the word of the things that they say live through space and everything, and they're little bitty, the little bears, you know, that they have, or whatever the actual name for them. Anyhow, so it starts to look a little something like that in between. Goes a couple of more big steps, and ends up being this amphibious thing. Is one of the amphibious things that lives through the giant, God, what is this? It's after the Cambrian, so what's the big extinction there? The name of it? Damn, now I'm spacing that. So then there was a huge extinction that happened there, but it's one of the things that come out of that. Well, one of the things came out of that, after everything got going real good again, spurned off into being non-aquatic, and this thing right here, and then not this thing right here, but that odd thing I was talking about in the middle, and then after it was non-aquatic, it slowly turned into a thing that was pre-proto to that shrew thing, that ended up being pre-proto to the thing that was before the monkey thing that wasn't a monkey thing quite yet, that split off, and so on and so on and so on. Anyhow, I just thought I'd share this with you, and right whenever he started going and he said how long ago it was and everything, the first thought that came to my mind is like, well, sometimes you can go too far with that lineage then, because I didn't want to be related to a slug. But honestly, you'd have to figure that it goes back to something. Well, it goes back to this, and this was a deviation of something that they can't find at this point. But all the other life that would be sedentary and before this point right here make up different creatures that don't end up being vertebrates at all. Is the way I understand it. Therefore, this would be the oldest ancestor to us. In a weird way, people, I think it's the oldest ancestor to horses, dogs, bears, and about 1,000 other things that you could think of right now too, because of the massive split that came after, and in between and after. And hey, you talked about an explosion that goes all the way down to shrew. You can imagine there's another explosion tree that goes down to this, down to that, down to that. Variations on a theme start happening, all because of this thing. If you believe it all. What the hell? Tell me what y'all think down in the comments. But yeah, about the size of a good grain of rice. We was maggots. Peace.